What's going on, people? My name is Batman. And as you may have heard in the news recently, Marty O'Donnell has won his lawsuit against Bungie. As a brief recap, Marty O'Donnell is the infamous music composer behind the masterpiece Halo soundtracks and of course now Destiny's. But unfortunately for all of us, right around the release of Destiny, he was fired. But he wasn't some low-level employee. He had a contract, significant financial stock in the company, all of which was taken from him illegally. He went on to sue Bungie for wrongful termination, and he won. He won big. In fact, he got just about everything he asked for. He has basically made Bungie his bitch, because now they still have to pay him. He retains his position as a stockholder and board member, which means he gets a cut of Bungie's profits, and he has a vote on shit they do, until the time at which his original contract was supposed to expire, which presumably isn't until the Destiny franchise is completed, or we'll see what happens. But he has all of that going for him. He has all those perks and all that money, and he doesn't even have to work for them anymore. So Bungie got wrecked, but I think the bigger takeaway from this lawsuit is that we now know definitively that Bungie's being run by douchebags. And it wasn't Activision. I know there's going to be some fanboy who wants to pretend to themselves that Activision is the big scary boogeyman, but it's just not true. The court documents make it very clear that Bungie management had no problem pushing O'Donnell out. Now, coincidentally, my mom is actually an attorney who practices employment law, and I worked for her as a receptionist for a little while, and a lot of the time, my job was basically just to write down people's stories, right? And I'm telling you, this kind of shit goes down all the time. In fact, the brief time I spent working there took a very serious toll on my faith in humanity. I know that everyone sees themselves as the good guy. And granted, maybe you have this one sliver of the population consisting of Charles Manson and the Joker, people who know they're the bad guy and don't care. But in general, human beings by default see themselves as the protagonist, not the bad guy. But a lot of the time, with shit like this, I just don't understand how they can rationalize their behavior. Not that what they've done is super evil or the end of the world, but they are so obviously and deliberately screwing someone who so clearly doesn't deserve to be screwed. What really stuck out to me in these court documents, and perhaps this is old news, but I was not previously aware of it, is that O'Donnell has already completed all of the music that is going to be used for the remainder of Destiny, right? It's a major symphony titled The Music of the Spheres, and they're just going to take the music in there and gradually adapt it to the games. So Harold Ryan, the CEO of Bungie, not only tried to unfairly push O'Donnell out, but push him out after he has already completed all the work, right? So they get the soundtracks without having to pay for them. It's just so obviously a dick move. You're just so obviously basically trying to steal someone's work without paying what you agreed to pay them for it. And I just know that Harold Ryan's bitch ass doesn't see it that way. He probably regrets it because now they're losing a bunch of money on the shit, but I bet you he doesn't regret it for the real reason he should, which is that it was a morally repugnant thing to do. And you see this in high levels of business a lot, where motherfuckers are looking for any reason to cut other motherfuckers out because that's more money for them, right? I'm reminded of the opening scene in Batman The Dark Knight when the robbers just kept shooting each other in the back of the head after each one completes their job. And had they not lost in court, Bungie would be saving a lot of money by basically robbing O'Donnell. It's several profit-sharing payments, the first of which was $140,000 plus $95,000 in unpaid wages, on top of the real dough, which is Marty's substantial share of Bungie stock that he is entitled to as a co-founder of Bungie. And Bungie's lawyers tried to argue he's not technically a founder, but the court said no, he really is. So he gets a cut of all the money that Bungie makes, even though he doesn't work for them anymore. Now, was it always their intention to push him out and basically rob him of what he's owed? No. They pushed him out for other reasons. But I bet you that had they known they wouldn't be able to rob him, that they'd be stuck making these massive payments to him without getting any work in return, that they wouldn't have gone through with it. They only felt comfortable pushing him out because they were under the impression they could turn a profit on it and get away with it. Right now, their primary motivation for firing O'Donnell was that he scared the shit out of them because he wasn't towing the line. O'Donnell recognized what has become every Destiny player's greatest fear, which is that Activision was taking over artistic control of Destiny. Now, the dispute began over the Destiny E3 trailer for E3 2013. What essentially happened is, at the last minute, Activision came in, threw out the music Marty had selected for said trailer, and used their own instead. Understandably, this pissed off Marty. He expressed his concerns to Bungie CEO Harold Ryan at the time, who sent Activision a veto letter. But I'm not sure why they call it a veto letter in the court documents because it doesn't actually have any veto power. What it was a Activision please be mercy letter. And Activision refused and did what they wanted anyways. Now, is the trailer music by itself a huge deal? No, but you have to understand it's the principle of the thing, right? It's precedent. It makes it very clear that Activision has final authority over artistic control. And I'm sure what was on his mind at the time is, well, if this is happening in the E3 trailer, What happens when the game actually releases? It's not a good feeling knowing that at any time you could have the rug pulled out from under you, especially on something you're working very hard on and that you take artistic pride in. Now, another area of dispute was Activision refusing to allow Bungie to release the Destiny soundtrack as a standalone purchase that you buy on like iTunes or whatever, right? That's what they've done with the Halo soundtracks. It's been very profitable and successful business practice, which is why it's weird that they didn't want to release it. It was just easy money and publicity. Now, it's worth mentioning that after they had illegally pushed Marty out, but before he had won his lawsuit, they began seeking a publishing partner to release the soundtracks. Again, such an obvious dick move. Here's this fucking thing that somebody else made, and now that we fired him, we get to sell it without giving him any of the profit. But anyways, we still don't know exactly why they refused to release the soundtrack, but the court's opinion, and this isn't some snide speculation, this is the opinion of a court of law, was that there was evidence to suggest Activision believed withholding release of the Destiny soundtrack could serve as leverage over O'Donnell to sort of control him, right? And we don't have the specifics of that. That's as far as it goes in the documents. But if the court says it, then it must have some basis in reality. Furthermore, at the time, and this is speculative, I wonder if Marty thought that maybe they weren't releasing the soundtrack because this isn't actually the Destiny soundtrack. Maybe they're already planning on fucking me with the game's release the same way they did with this E3 trailer, or at the very least leaving the door open so that it's still an option when the time comes, right? But the most important thing we need to keep in mind is that this was all going on around the same time that Joseph Staten, the lead writer, left voluntarily after all his work was thrown out the door, right? Taken in that context, O'Donnell had plenty of reason to be concerned about the nature of Bungie's relationship to Activision, and he wasn't going to go quietly like Staten. Taken in that context, O'Donnell had plenty of reason to be concerned about the nature of Bungie's relationship to Activision. They had screwed with his artistic control. They had completely screwed with the writer's artistic control, so much so that the writer felt he had to leave and give up a fat paycheck to do that. He was concerned, and he wasn't going to go quietly. He brought it up in press briefings. During E3, he tweeted that the music in the trailer wasn't his, and that's what I think really pissed off Bungie. They don't want their disputes going public because they don't want the fans getting involved, because enough negative PR and they'll lose all control. And maybe that's why Marty was tweeting his frustrations in the first place, like an SOS to the fan base that we failed to heed. Anyways, the court document stated that O'Donnell believed he was preserving, and I quote, Bungie's creative process, artistic integrity, and reputation, keeping faith with the fans and protecting Bungie and its intellectual property from Activision's encroachment into artistic decisions, end quote. However, Bungie management felt, and again I'm quoting the court documents here, that his conduct hurt the Bungie team, hurt the game, drove a negative online discussion, and violated Ryan's instructions. Now, the part that sticks out to me there is that it drove a negative online discussion. Now, see, that's what I think they were really worried about, because there's no real evidence of the other stuff, that O'Donnell was hurting Bungie or the game or whatever, because if there was actual evidence of that, he wouldn't have won the lawsuit entirely. He literally got everything he asked for, which is the court's way of saying whatever Bungie was upset about was complete, made-up bullshit. So Bungie management, the CEO, Harold Ryan, decided to fire O'Donnell. And I suspect part of what made that decision so easy for them is that, again, they realized how much money they would be saving by cutting him out, and they already had most of the work they needed from him anyways. But fortunately, Marty won the lawsuit, and Bungie got fucking exposed. Now, the reason I suspect that PR concerns are what drove the decision to push him out is that even after the ruling, Bungie is still aggressively trying to change the PR narrative. So most gaming media outlets reported on this in a fairly straightforward fashion. Marty won, right? And worse for Bungie's reputation, Marty won everything he asked for, which implies rather definitively that Bungie acted inappropriately, and that takes a significant toll on their public image, right? And that's what they're afraid of. Now, remember the statement they put out when they first fired him? Bungie titled the post, "Some thought this day would never come," and went on to say, and I quote, "For more than a decade, Marty O'Donnell filled our worlds with unforgettable sounds and soundtracks and left an indelible mark on our fans. Today, as friends, we say goodbye. We know that wherever his journey takes him, he will always have a bright and hopeful future. We wish him luck in all his future endeavors." They tried so hard to paint this as some nice, amicable separation, when it was anything but that. It was ugly. They are scared to death that their fans will know the truth, which is that they pushed him out for slimy-ass reasons. And they've tried to shape this narrative from the moment they fired him with that fucking sleazy, untrue, brutally sugar-coated statement. And now they're continuing to file complaints with the court against him in a concentrated effort to change the narrative. They don't want it to be remembered as an absolute victory for Marty, confirming the worst about Bungie. They want it to be kind of a wash. They want to make it seem like they won something too. so as to suggest that both sides were in the wrong. So this is sort of some legal mumbo jumbo, but basically Bungie is not contesting or trying to appeal the initial ruling, right? They're surrendering and are giving Marty what he's owed, and they're not contesting any of the actual tangible awards in the ruling. What they've done is filed a motion to enforce the ruling to all parties, which basically means they're asking the court to officially order O'Donnell to return CD copies that he owns of the Music of Spheres Symphony that he made, and some t-shirts and some coffee mugs. But the joke is, not only is that really trivial shit, but he also already did that stuff. He already returned all that stuff. They just want it officially enforced for the record, right? And that's in the court documents. It's stated that he's already returned that stuff. But they want it enforced for the record so they can say, hey, look, we won something too, and basically over-exaggerate that to make it look like both sides were in the wrong, and then hopefully escape this narrative that's been presented in the press as a big bad company pushing out a valuable member of their team for no good reason. And then, within the motion they filed at court, they talk mad shit, right? So when you file a motion against someone in court, you fill out a brief, which is your summary of events and why the court should do what you're asking. And in that summary of events, you can get creative, and the shit is always public. So if you know the press is going to be following it, you know, you can fit in a whole bunch of shit talking into your brief, which is what they did, right? So they get to talk shit as a matter of public record, and hopefully the press will repeat some of that stuff in their articles, and it will help push the narrative back in their favor. And again, this means higher legal fees and whatnot, so clearly it's not some trivial thing for Bungie. Bungie is very concerned about the public's opinion of them. Anyways, they basically spend an unnecessarily long time trying to say that Marty's a selfish, butthurt, crybaby asshole, and Marty's lawyer goes on to say, and I quote, Bungie is attempting to use the court case as a public forum to push their narrative. They have filed a 12-page response to Marty's motion to enforce the final ruling that spins, slants, and at times flat out misrepresents the ruling. The only reason for them to file this is to make a public record for the PR. The prior 10 pages of garbage is an obvious and transparent attempt at damage control by recasting the ruling as a huge win by Bungie. And that's where things stand presently. And I just bring that up to reinforce the point that they were concerned about the PR from the beginning and that PR matters. So ultimately, this sucks for Destiny fans, because it will take a toll on the quality of the game's music and sounds, because keep in mind, he not only worked on the music, but also, you know, the sounds and the voices and stuff like that. And something he's actually talked about before in the past is how he likes to play through a game sequence and understand its role in the overall story before he chooses what music to put in, right? So he's no longer able to do that. He can't shepherd his work through the series. And even though he's already composed it, I'm sure he had intended to remix and readjust and reimagine certain songs for certain parts of the game, just as he did with the Halo soundtracks. They might be able to get some fucking hack to come in and play around with the music, but the original composer will always have the best vision for shepherding his own work. And worse, even if he had stayed, his work still wouldn't be as great as it could have been, because one of the things that Bungie management complained about, and I'm quoting the court documents directly again here, was that the audio team and his supervisor did not consider him to be fully engaged in his work. The thing about artists and art, which is what gaming is, and obviously music, is that a big part of what makes stuff like that great is passion, personal passion, your pride in your work. People wanting to take pride in their work, especially when other people are going to see it, is the entire point to art. At a certain point, Marty didn't even know if the stuff he was making was gonna make the final cut, right? He didn't know what Activision was gonna come in and muck up. What's the point to giving your 100% if you don't have full artistic control? If whatever hard work or masterpiece you create can just be fucking cut and rearranged at the last minute. And again, Joe Staten, the writer, was compelled to quit outright. He was so disillusioned with what was done with his work, and he gave up a big paycheck for that, no doubt, which just goes to show that artists like this aren't in it primarily for the money. They're more interested in creating something special. That's where the best art comes from. That's what made Halo. They killed Marty's passion when they started fucking with his artistic control. Of course that's going to affect his work. Of course he's not going to be as engaged. And then they have the audacity to get mad about it. It's poor management. A project like this needs strong leadership. Management that knows how to manage more than just numbers on a spreadsheet, but manage human beings themselves. You read about Google and Tesla and Apple, that's what you'll hear about. Making the most of your people, not just your profits. This vindictive, greedy fuck, Harold Ryan, doesn't care about his workers, and he obviously doesn't care about his customers or his product. He's obsessed with his paycheck. The broader point I wanted to make with this commentary is that both gamers, especially those gamers who tell themselves they care about this franchise, and gaming media, should do more to scrutinize the behind-the-scenes of game development studios like Bungie, and Bungie especially. Clearly it affects them. Clearly they are scared of negative public opinion. And if we held them more accountable, not just after the game released, and not just based on the game's quality, but on the manner in which they conducted themselves during its production, they would be pressured to behave in a more appropriate manner. There would be less opportunity to make some shady move that ultimately hurts the customer's experience. The problem with Destiny is that it was always good, but it was never as good as it was supposed to be, and it could have been great, and it's hard to judge what could have been without taking a look behind the curtain. But when people do find out what could have been, it makes it clear what a mediocre sham Destiny ended up being. And in my experience, when people find out why this game isn't the masterpiece it should have been, when they realize it's because of shady behavior like this, because of this profit tunnel vision these guys get, players become disillusioned with the truth. And that's where negative public opinion comes from, and negative public opinion is what forces companies to change. And that change is what makes a better game. If games media had done a better job covering not only this game's marketing campaign, not only acting as a mouthpiece for advertising, but doing more to dissect its actual development process and the team behind that process, this game might not have been the colossal disappointment that it was for so many people on release. It's about voting with your dollar, and to really do that, we need to take into account more than just the quality of the product, but actually peel back the curtain and judge the behavior of the artists behind it as well. In the future, we should treat Bungie with the skepticism they deserve. One of the big reasons this game was so successful was because of the Bungie brand, right? They had mad street cred following Halo. People thought highly of them, not only as strong game developers, but game developers who genuinely cared about their community and customers. We know now that neither of those things is true anymore. And I know people want to love Bungie just like people want to love their favorite artists, but can we all agree that this was kind of douchey? Can we agree that two of the biggest creative pillars of what made the studio great, the story writing and the music, are both gone now? This love for Bungie clouds people's judgment when deciding whether or not to buy Destiny-related products. And now we know that love is so misplaced. Not to mention, it's also abundantly clear at this point that Activision has full creative control over the entire project whenever they choose to exercise it. It's Bungie vision. If you want to pretend Activision is the big bad guy, fine. But it doesn't change anything. At the end of the day, it's the product that matters, and you don't know who's really behind that product. The product you love might very well just be built by that corporate overlord you pretend to hate in an effort to spare Bungie. And we can pretend that Activision is the bad guy and Bungie is this tortured artist slaving under the corporate overlord. But look, Marty recognized that Activision had too much artistic control. A tortured artist did try and stand up against the machine, and guess what? Bungie management pushed him out. Illegally. Bungie management is a team of douchebags, and an actual court of law has confirmed that now. They have confirmed that they were acting like dicks and that they deserve to lose a bunch of money for it. And it's not some opinion online, it is the official stance of a judicial body of the people of the United States. Marty had a happy ending, but will Destiny? Thanks for watching. The For the Win query of the day is, do you like the new Taken King expansion? Why or why not? This is B. Dobbins, signing out.